Hey guys, Levi here, welcome to my channel. If you're not subscribed yet, please consider doing so as it helps my channel a lot. Today I would like to address the single biggest mistake you can make in Albion Online that will cost you millions. In such an unforgiving game where every mistake you make is punishing in one form or another, I feel like this mistake takes the cake. And no, it's not my terrible rhyming skills. What it is, however, is overgearing. You would be surprised about how many players in this game make this mistake and end up quitting because of it. And it's not even limited to newer players only. Although I do want to prevent newer players from making this mistake by recommending what to do and what not to do in this video, I also think this message is important for those that are struggling with their silver progress in general. Because if there's one reason why you're not progressing your economy optimally, it's because you're losing more silver than you are making. Which sounds very logical and may even get your eyes rolling. But to any veteran player, the mistake of overgearing is just as logical. Which begs the question, is overgearing necessary and why do people overgear in Albion Online? Although there are many possible reasons why players overgear, I feel like the most prevalent reasons are as follows. First of all, I think many newer players overgear because they feel like they have to, whether it's for PvE or PvP. When a PvE challenge seems to be too challenging, players quickly think that their gear is not good enough and they need higher gear in order to succeed. Whereas in my experience, when it comes to PvE, there are multiple other reasons why players typically fail. Reasons such as having ineffective builds, not knowing the mechanics of the mobs and bosses, not putting an active effort in avoiding damage, pulling too many mobs at once, and doing content that's meant for a larger group of players. In fact, there's even a good chunk of players that fail in PvE because they simply don't have the necessary Reaver level. Basically, many reasons that come long before the level of your gear. And failing is not limited to PvE alone. You will also fail in PvP where the failure quickly turns into a loss that plays with your emotions. After all, being killed by another player and losing to them is the last thing you want to happen. Even more so when you lose all of your gear and everything you have on you. It's only normal that everyone wants those sweet W's, and it shows because they're willing to do anything for them. In Albion Online, this leads to many players overgearing, which leads to even bigger losses, a bigger sense of defeat, and even more frustration. You have to realize that no matter how OP your build is and how high it is in tier and enchantment, you will get countered by many other players. Most often than not, you will lose even if your gear is slightly higher. That's simply how the game is designed. There are so many different weapons, armors and abilities which all cancel each other out. Makes it nearly impossible to have a build that beats every other build. Some of the other reasons why you will lose in PvP from time to time is because you'll get outnumbered, you face a much more knowledgeable and skilled opponent, you will make plenty of mistakes of your own, you will get low on PvE and get dived, or you could simply be unlucky in many other ways. If you ever died and lost your gear because of a faulty internet connection, you most certainly know about that last bit. And in almost none of these situations would higher gear make for a better outcome. My point is that there are various things that sometimes are out of your control, which will lead to an L in Albion Online. Which is exactly why you want to limit the damage in silver whenever you die in this game. After all, this is an open world sandbox game, so anything can happen any moment. And with thousands of players playing the game actively, there's bound to be some enemies close to you most of the time to seize the opportunity of your misfortune. Or as I said before, your lack of skill, which your ego may not want to hear, but your pockets definitely have to. So what can you do to limit the damage in silver whenever you die? The answer is going to be very obvious, but it's something that every player needs to hear and more importantly, apply to their gameplay. Just go out with cheap stats. Just play in the bare minimum gear you need in order to succeed, which more often than not will be items that are between tier 4.1 and tier 6. And the only reason you want to have tier 5 and tier 6 items is because they sometimes have abilities that tier 4 items don't have. Other than that, you want to go with whatever is the cheapest option at any given moment. What's far more important than the level of your gear is the effectiveness of it. From your choice in food to your weapons and armors, together with the abilities and passives you have selected, based on the content you are doing, you want to have a loadout that's set up for success. Because whether you are in tier 4 gear or in tier 8 gear, you will have to learn the abilities of the mobs on the roads of Avalon to decrease the chances of you dying whilst clearing them. Whether you enter the corrupted dungeons with a 4.1 set or an 8.1 set, the abilities of the final bosses will remain the same, just like their skill rotations. So why not approach everything as cheap as possible and learn the game in the most forgiving way? Once you have your economy running and you are comfortable losing hundreds of thousands of silver every time you die, and you have a better understanding of the game features and mechanics, that's when you want to start playing in 6.1 or higher. I've proven time and time over with various videos where I make new characters that a 4.1 or 4.2 set is all you need most of the time that you are playing. And I've also proven that you can successfully clear various content that will progress you in both fame and silver with such cheap sets. So if I can give any form of advice to prevent you from making the biggest mistake in this game, it's to stick to cheaper sets that are effective until you know better and can actually afford it. Do note that certain content in Albion Online has soft caps to them. These are often the instanced content features. One example would be the corrupted dungeons. These have a minimum average item power requirement and also an item power cap. The Hunter level has a soft cap of 900, the Stalker level has a soft cap of 1000, and the Slayer level has a soft cap of 1300. Although you can enter these levels by meeting the minimum required IP, which is 100 IP lower, it's highly recommended to meet the soft cap instead, because other players will typically meet the soft cap as well, which will put them at a noticeable advantage. As you can see, you can also overgear in these content types, which you will receive a penalty for doing so. In Hunter, any item power past 900 will only be 10% as effective. So if you enter with 1000 item power on an item, you will end up with 910 IP on it, which often may not be worth the difference in item cost. If the content is for loot, you're paying a lot extra for a tiny benefit. And if it's not for loot, your repair costs will increase when you use higher gear. So even in safe content, there is a risk versus reward mechanic in place where the losses affect your repair costs instead of losing your gear. I do want to make clear that gear is important in Albion Online. I feel like if I don't mention this, I'll get a bunch of angry comments from players that completely miss the point of this video. Every 100 item power makes for about 10% increase in stats. So between a 4.1 set and a 7.1, you're already looking at roughly 30% increase in both offensive and defensive stats. And not only that, but you'll also see a difference in the duration of the crowd controls and the effects of passive abilities. Then you have the mastery modifier on higher tier gear, which will grant another wave of bonuses to reward players for using higher tier gear, pretty much making higher tier gear that much stronger. I simply think the level of gear is not important until newer players reach a certain point. Up to that point, the type of gear I mentioned before will be enough to increase your game knowledge and have fun in a sustainable way. The type of gear and the effectiveness of it is far more important and will be the deciding factor when doing most of the content. Once you join a guild and start doing group activities based on the gear requirement for certain content, you may already notice a bump in the type of gear you wear. There's also some PvE content within the game that is very difficult to do with lower levels of gear, which is another area where higher gear is justified. But these typically aren't the types of content you'll be doing as a newer player. In conclusion, I think the most important thing for newer players is for them to progress through the game in a sustainable way. This can be done with gear that's tier 6 or lower, with 4.1 as the bare minimum. Your goal as a new player is to learn the game's features and mechanics, which is something you're best off doing in affordable sets whilst grinding up your silver and farming up your fame. I think that as you become more knowledgeable about the game and build your economy, you can increase your gear to 6.1 and slowly even higher. The type of gear you wear and the abilities you have access to are far more important than the level of your gear. If you're not sure what build to play yet, I have a bunch of great starter builds for beginners that are all very effective and will get your progress going in Albion Online.